This is Will of a Cardboard Minute, and we're going to take a look at some social deduction games in my collection. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what they are and why they work and what kind of groups they work with. A social deduction game is where a secret role is given out to one or more players, and as part of the function of the game, the players are trying to determine either what that player is or what role they have or what they're trying to do. Now, this can lead to some very tense games and with some potentially heated emotions. So do be warned that you need to play these kinds of games with the right group, but they can really excel and cause some stand-up moments. Now, there are quite a wide range. One of the most popular and enduring games would be Werewolf. Werewolf is loosely based on the classic game of Mafia, where there are several werewolves in the game, usually adjusted based on player numbers. And the other players are trying to survive by voting out the werewolves from their village during the day. Now, the game will split into a night phase after a brief discussion during the daytime phase. And during the night, the werewolves will have a chance to eat the villagers. Now, what really brings Werewolf to shine is that there has been such a large community behind the Werewolf game, as well as the various deluxe versions that Basic Games have come out with, have really included all kinds of interesting roles. And it's really the special roles that make this game shine. Now, we just played a game with a bunch of scouts. So these are youth between the ages of 11 and 15. And we played this over Zoom. Now, because of the pandemic, we've been kind of stuck with doing things online and are just starting to get back in person. But even when playing in person pre-pandemic, they have really enjoyed this and have gone on to run their own games during their spare time. Now, the one thing about running a game, and I say that because you do need to have someone run it. There is a moderator that will be required, one of the players, preferably someone who knows the game extremely well, will need to take the role of actually leading the game and explaining and walking the game through its paces. Now, this could turn out really well if the moderator knows what they're doing, but if the moderator's not, the game could fall apart, and I have seen that many times as well. This is especially important when it comes to keep track of secret information. So is a highly recommended game for groups that are prepared for something such as this. And it can be played very simply. We have played it with poker chips around a campfire, where everyone's drawn a colored chip from a bag and held it in their fists. And if you were a certain color, you were a werewolf. If you were another color, you were had a different role. And has brought many fun times and arguments and heated discussions over who is werewolf and who is not. But I think if you go in with the right frame of mind to any of the social deduction games, then you will still come away as friends and have had a great time doing so. Now, Werewolf will play larger numbers, although I don't recommend it with anything too large. Bring it down a little bit is Avalon. Avalon adds a little bit more structure to the werewolf idea. There are two teams. They're the good guys and the bad guys, essentially. There is a version of this game called The Resistance that adds more of a spy flavor. Now, Avalon is my preferred version because it does add some additional secret roles that spice it up a little bit. Roles such as Merlin, who knows who some of the bad guys are, but if he gets found out at the end of the game, then by the bad guys, then they get defeated and they lose the game. So the structure that Avalon adds is multiple missions where the players will vote on who goes to play to complete the mission, and then the players will then secretly turn in complete or fail tokens, and which will determine whether the mission is completed or not. So obviously the players working on the evil team do not want to give themselves away too early, but do want to ensure that a majority of missions fail. This game does add a great amount of structure to the game as like a werewolf game, but also brings down the playtime, so which can excel if you don't have as much time as required for Werewolf, which could be anywhere from 20 minutes to an hour or two. Avalon will also play between 5 to 10 players. Then if you want to add a little more chaos, I suggest Bang, the dice game. Now, this game, you will have a sheriff who is the only known player of the game. And then he will have deputies and outlaws and some renegades that will be attempting to either shoot the sheriff or protect him. Now, the sheriff wins, and in fact, all the good guys win if the sheriff is the last player still alive or there are only good players left. But it's really the dice that will shine in this case, because you have to roll them, kind of Yahtzee style, and then the dice will be used to either attack the sheriff or other players, kill the sheriff, or cause utter havoc in the game. And part of the deduction will mean that you can throw kind of a wrench into the schemes by blaming the dice. The dice show up as they show up, and you may have to shoot somebody that you did not intend to shoot, or did you? Maybe you did all along. So very fun, easy to learn, a great recommendation for families, plays between 3 and 8. And there are also some special powers and things that players can have in here that will spice up the game a little bit. Next, we have Crossfire. Crossfire is Werewolf on a timer. It is an extremely fast game where some very limited amounts of information are passed between players, and you must deduce everything within one round. There are games that also do this, like the Werewolf One Night versions. But this Crossfire keeps it very simple and very fast, as well as there are some alternate modes, like a sniper mode, where you need to peg the bad guys immediately, right away. So similarly, we have Mafia. Now, Mafia de Cuba, not the original Mafia. The theme of this game is quite interesting. You have a cigar box, which you are passing along the table, and the players will have to open up the cigar box and potentially steal some things from within. Now, what is in the box is some gems that the players are trying to steal, which are like the money from the henchmen, and but also the various rolls are on poker chips within the box. Now, this means that you get a chance to select your roll, which is very rare in social deduction games. Usually they're handed out randomly. But it all comes down to the mob boss, the Godfather. He will be the last person to get the box, and in his dismay, he'll open it up and see that all his gems are missing. And now he is trying to pin the crime on the disloyal mob bosses that have taken the gems. But there are some traps in there. If he manages to call up on one of the police officers, then he loses the game. But you are allowed to ask questions. You can approach a player and say, the player before you may have taken this roll. Was that roll still in the box? Or how many gems were left in the box when it came to you? And by piecing together that kind of information, he can deduce who his allies are and who the enemies are. And lastly is Coup. This really is the best one that works at smaller numbers. There are a number of rolls that are cards in the game, and each roll has a special ability associated with it. Now, on your turn in this game, you may do any of the special abilities you wish, as long as other players do not call your bluff. Now, it is not unusual for a round to go by where every player at a table takes the same roll. And even though you know that there are not that many rolls of that type in the game, nobody is willing to challenge each other on it. It all comes down to last person standing. So that's my recommendation. There are many more social deduction games out there, and I find that they do really make a fun evening. They're very light, give a bit of a party atmosphere, but adds a little bit of tension as well. And if you keep it simple, like something like Werewolf, you could even play it, like I said, around a campfire or with schools. in a classroom setting, it really can work just about anywhere. Obviously, Werewolf does require a moderator, though. Now, part of the fun is in that tension, right? So when you're playing the game, you feel both like everybody is against you, but you know you have allies. You're trying to decide who is on your team, who's not on your team. Who do you think is the werewolf, or the renegades, or the who's trying to kill the VIP? Who the roles are of the other players, and you're trying to piece together what information you have based on the actions of others. And I think this is what really brings in a lot of the main draw of social deduction games. Is the games are a place setting that let you watch and analyze other people to decide what are their motives, what are they trying to do, in the framework of the game, or the roles they have, what are they trying to accomplish. And by watching their actions, listening to how they speak, what they speak about, who they accuse or how they accuse, whether they're quiet and withdrawn, whereas they're normally boisterous, or they are the opposite. Those can be tells that will give away what their roles are. And it is very interesting as both a social element, but also just watching the human construct. How do people act is always very fascinating to me, and especially in roles like this. Plus, it gives you a chance to bluff and lie and pretend, and pretend to murder your friends. It's I always advocate to tell the truth, in everything you do. But it is fun to occasionally bluff or pretend something in a game. You could say there's a little bit of crossover with role-playing games in that sense, where you are acting a role, or you are a role and are trying to not act it out. And I would say you'd probably have an advantage if you had, a straight poker face. But that would be difficult to have. This is a very different kind of game. So these are some excellent early recommendations. There are more complicated games in the market, and certainly easier ones too. But I hope you will have fun and enjoy your time playing them. And that is a Cardboard Minute. If you have any recommendations for social deduction games, especially games that I can play with large groups of people or kids, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, and have a great week.